Well, I think we'll get started. People may pop on a bit late, but that's okay. I think everybody here knows Laura French. She's been a member of our congregation for a couple of years. Of course, most of that's been you've met her on a little square and a Zoom screen, but she's taken over as chair of our adult education committee, which has been awesome. And she's a member of our leadership council now. And Laura's got a long history of teaching and writing. And so we're going to hear what she's been doing in recent months with her skills and things she feels she has something that we all might be something we can do too. So go ahead, Laura.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so welcome to My Life in Objects. And this whole kind of experiment started when over President's Day last February. So there's a congregation in Albuquerque that is called Nahalat Shalom. Some of you may remember when their now retired executive director, Dina Pally, did the wonderful presentation on paper cutting. And so every President's Day, they do something called Klezmer Kirky, which is mostly about folk dancing and folk music. And so it's kind of amazing that they were able to put it online this year. You'd think that there would be an event that wouldn't lend itself to that, but they did kind of manage it. And so I attended, and one of the sort of little side things that they had going was something called or it was a storytelling workshop with a wonderful teacher named Atya Podos, who I studied with before, and she's really good, and so I signed up for that. And the assignment was for each of us to bring a family object and then tell the story of the object. And so I very quickly grabbed something out of my little display case that I had been thinking about a lot, and and this is the first object that I told the story of.
Hmm.
Um, this belonged to my Uncle Jack, who had polio when he was, I'm guessing, about 4. You guys know more about kids' shoe sizes than I do. And so this is the boot that he wore when he had to learn to walk again after he had polio. And my my grandmother always had this on display in her house. And then, it had sort of disappeared. Um, and my uncle recovered from polio, lied to the US government so that he could get into the Navy, served in World War II on the USS Baltimore, and he kept this little war diary on scraps of paper. And at one point, he on the ship was able to meet another polio survivor when President Roosevelt came and had a conference with some of the generals to plan the land invasion of Japan. But being my uncle, he was way more excited that Fala was also along, the president's dog. And so his diary had like 5 references to Fala and said, oh, Roosevelt was at chapel this morning. So, um, but Jack lived a very long, full, rich life. He hunted, he fished, he did woodworking. Um, and he died just short of his 86th birthday. And his wife had already died. My cousin inherited the house. She died very unexpectedly in 2011. So I inherited the house. And as I was going through things in the basement, there was this, one of those flimsy metal cabinets that was mainly filled with little cans of varnish. And way in the back, I found this. And one of the things I've realized as I've been writing about objects is that objects have secrets. Even the things that, I mean, I know all about my Uncle Jack and I know about this boot, um, but I would love to be able to ask the boot. I'd much rather be able to ask Uncle Jack, why was it in the back of that metal cabinet? Was it that he really didn't want to look at it? He really didn't want it around, but he couldn't bear to throw it away. So I snapped a picture of it, emailed it to my mother with no comment, and she immediately said, "I'm so glad you found that. I wondered what had happened to it." So I told that story at the workshop, um, and it was, it was storytelling, it was verbal, but I'm a writer. So after the workshop, I wrote the story, and then I really just kind of kept writing about some of the other objects. So at this point, um, I've kind of decided for myself that I've come up with four reasons why you might want to write about the objects in your life. The first is just memoir or biography. I realized that when my mother died, and ironically, um, my uncle survived a pandemic, and my mother, as a lot of you know, did not survive this one. And so I realized, there's really nobody left alive who knows anything about the first 10 years of my life. Um, and so, I kind of figured maybe I should tell about those things. There's nobody left in my family who really knows as much about my uncle and my cousins and all those things as I do. Um, and it's really an easy way to start telling about your life because you don't have to worry about where to begin or where to end, or, you just pick 10 objects and start writing. And, you don't have to worry about dates and what came first. You just write the story. The second thing is an ethical will. I mean, it's the objects that you inherit and that you value really, I think, embody I mean, there's a reason that we value those objects, and it's because that they represent the values, that our family had. And then the third good reason is just for the whole process of gifting and bequeathing. I mean, it occurred to me that a really good reason to write about something like this little boot is that if I were hit by the axiomatic truck tomorrow, and somebody had to clean it, come into my house, I mean, people would just go, "Why did she have that?" and probably throw it away. So, making sure that the story is told. What was this? Where did it come from? Why do you have it in a display case, with the glass paperweights? Uh, I think is a good thing to do. And then it's also just kind of a good way of writing about anything, really. Um, and so I will talk about some of those various things in a minute. Um, so, um, uh, so what do you do with the stories after you write them? For me, a lot of it has just been learning from the process of telling the stories. As I said, even the things that I think I know the best, I start telling the story and I realize there's something I don't know that, that's kind of a mystery. Um, well, I'm a writer, so it just kind of feels good. And then, you can sort of teach your values and your history by sharing the stories. I made sure that my siblings got a copy of the stories, so that, because they're a lot younger, and so there's a lot of these things that they kind of just don't know. Um, and then there's a really charming, I know it doesn't sound really charming, but it's a really charming book called Swedish Death Cleaning. Um, the audio book is really nice. It's by this, very quiet voiced British woman. And Swedish death cleaning sounds better in Swedish. But it's the idea that you really should spend the last decade or so of your life getting your affairs in order so that, your descendants aren't left with a big mess. And one of the things she advocates is, starting to give away some of your possessions as gifts. And And so, if you give the gift with the story that's attached to it, then it's not just the sort of regifting some old used thing. It actually it has that sort of added value. And I know one of my upcoming projects, my mother always said she was going to tell the stories of all these things. She always said, now some of that stuff I just bought at auction, but some of it's really important and it should be kept in the family. And then she never said which was which. And, then she had her health failed rather suddenly. And so my sister has this basement full of stuff. So, telling the stories and gradually bequeathing those things can be good. Um, Communicating your wishes. I have actually, I think, a completely illegal request in my will. That there's a little basket with a lot of ashes of all the pets that I've had over the last 30 years, and somebody needs to go and sneak those in with me. Um, and so I told the story about the basket so that, somebody someday will say, okay, that's what this thing is. And sure, it's worth breaking the law over that because it's what she really wanted, right? Um, and then a thing that I found just relatively recently, that wasn't really part of my initial objective is that, after I've told the story, I really feel ready to let go of a lot of things. Marie Kondo, who was all the rage at the beginning of the pandemic, said, you should touch all of your belongings every day, which is kind of strange to me, but um, and if it doesn't spark joy, get rid of it. And I didn't understand that, but I think I do understand, like, if there's no story attached to it, if it's just something I bought and I can't remember where and I can't remember why, I don't need it anymore. So there are some things. Um, I had this collection of paperweights because I had a paperweight, and then I thought, well, I should collect some more. So I'm keeping the original paperweight that had a story, and the rest of them I'm packing up to get rid of. So, um, and there are a lot of ways that you can share it. I mean, I just turned mine into a PDF and sent it off to my brother and sister because they're the ones who will need to know these things. But if you wanted to start, um, doing the Swedish death cleaning idea of giving away some things to people for special occasions, you could make a special note card or stationery so that the stationery kind of signals, oh, here's a story, and here's what, I'm really looking forward to the story along with the gift. And then it's very easy to make a booklet. Some of you know that in November of last year, for NaNoWriMo, which is National Novel Writing Month, I wrote 52,000 words on the pandemic up to that point. Um, because in November I was remembering those sort of innocent days when we thought it was all about yeast and toilet paper. And so I thought, I want to kind of capture the beginning of it, because now it's all so much different. So I wrote those stories, and it's really easy to just take a Word doc and format it and take it to, Minuteman Press, and they will write up some booklets for you. Um, I also turned this just to see if I could do it. There's actually a Kindle edition of this book out there, that as far as I know, hasn't sold any copies because I haven't told anybody it's there. But I wanted to just see what the process is like of doing the data conversion, and really it's pretty easy. Um, uh, and I'm a writer, so I write, but it's also possible to do a Zoom recording, and upload it to YouTube. Um, and then I also have started a blog about my life and objects, and if anybody's interested in that, just ask me later and I will send you the link. So, um, and so Another thing that I've done, if anybody's interested in trying this for themselves, um, I've kind of put together some writing exercises, some writing prompts. So if you're not a writer and you kind of go, I don't know how to start with this, um, you can do that. So one possibility is to write about an unattractive object. I mean, I think, we start out assuming that the object that we would write about is something, beautiful or valuable. But of course, I started with this thing. So, is there something in your household that just really has a story to you that has no material value, that anybody else would have a really hard time understanding why you keep it around? Telling that story because you've got something that you want to communicate that isn't just real obvious from looking at it. So that can be a good way to start. Um, I think about, if there would be one thing I wish we had kept. My grandmother had a spoon, just, like a tablespoon, that she used to stir the gravy in the cast iron pot, and it was actually worn down on one side. And if I think of anything that represented my grandmother's life as a farm wife, it's that spoon that she actually wore out stirring the gravy. Um, Another exercise that you can do is combining two objects to create a new story. So I did that with these two objects. And so this, maybe I'll stop sharing for a second so that, so this is an egg basket, kind of old and, beat up, and it's got a little bit of paint on it, but it's the kind, that's made so that the eggs can kind of nestle in either side. Um, and this is a really beautiful ruby glass with gold trim on it. So not two objects that you would think of together, but to me, they have always been completely united because during the Depression, my grandmother, who was a farm wife, and they never wanted for food. My mother was always really clear about that because they were farmers. But there was no cash to buy anything, dresses or anything like that. So my grandmother sold the eggs, and that was a major source of actual cash, was the egg money. But what she did with at least part of the egg money, every time she saved up, I think it was a dime or a quarter, she would buy one of these glasses. And that to me is my grandmother. She was practical, she was hardworking, she was unsentimental, and yet she also was an artist. I have, several paintings that she did. She played the piano. In my life of a whole bunch of people acting totally baffled about how to teach me anything because I'm left-handed, she just gave me a crochet hook and a bunch of yarn and said, sit down facing me and do everything I do. Which, yeah, I mean, that made perfect sense. So these two objects together tell the story of my grandmother in the way that either one of them really doesn't. It's that juxtaposition and contrast of, the kind of practical work ethic with the really strong artistic sense. And, I like to think I've inherited some of that. Um, you can tell, I think the next one is to tell about an object that you don't really like. Yeah, write about an object you don't love. Um, and there is a painting that's out in the hall, and I won't drag you all into the hall with me, but um, one day when I was still living in Nebraska, my friend Jan McMullen said, "You know, I've got something that should go back in your family. I bought it at your grandparents' auction and I've had it all this time, but really it should stay in the family. I'm going to give it back to you." And the minute she said that, I thought, it's those damn sheep. There was a picture that always hung in the front room of my grandparents' house, and it's a flock of sheep who are trapped in a blizzard. And it is the most depressing, horrible thing. And for some reason, it seemed like it was always cold in that front room, which can't be true because I was usually there in the summer when it was, 102. But in my mind, I'm always in that front room and it's cold and there's those sheep. And my mother was haunted by the sheep and I was haunted by the sheep and my younger sister was haunted by the sheep. And sure enough, here comes Jan with this picture of the sheep. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much for returning this to the family." Thinking there was a reason it went in the auction, Jan. Um, and the worst part of it is that it's a really good painting. The artist who it's a woman painter who had some reputation down in that part of the country, and it's quite well done. And I had it restored, um, and so I'm kind of stuck with it. But for the whole generations of my family, part of the story is that nobody has actually loved that painting. We're all kind of haunted by it, but there you go. So yeah, write about an object you don't love. There's another one kind of over my shoulder. Those of you who have been seeing me on Zoom for the past 18 months, there's a painting that I have that's of my grandparents' farm. And my grandfather's in the farmyard with his prize bull. And and that one my uncle kept in the rafters of his workshop. Um, but there's a little bit of an edge to it. There were some tensions between my mother and her sister about the painting, and it's really not a very good painting. Um, so in the process of doing this writing, one of the things that my siblings and I decided is that this can actually go to a couple of young guys who actually grew up on that farm after my grandparents sold it. And they both have recognized the painting when they've been in my house. And so we kind of said, yes, the Stanleys can have that painting. So I haven't quite, had the courage to give it up yet, but writing it can also kind of give you some ideas for what to do about it. So um, you can write about what you don't know. So the standard advice about writing is to write what you know, but sometimes with objects, as with Uncle Jack's polio boot, why did he keep it buried in this closet? Um, why didn't he just get rid of it if he didn't want it? But also, I always wear this diamond ring that belonged to my grandmother. Um, and I found it, when I inherited Patty's house, but there was a huge mystery about the ring. Um, and so, in the process of writing about the ring, I wrote about this mystery, and I have tried to, I won't be able ever to solve it. Um, so I kind of captured what the mystery is, and I have a sort of a theory about a solution, but again, I'll never really be able to prove it. So, um, using an object can be the best way to tell the story of a person. There was a woman named Anna Mae Whittington, who again was from Stella. At one time, she was the oldest woman in Stella. I didn't meet her until she was in probably her early 90s. She died just short of her 100th birthday. Um, and and I didn't know her well. The only thing really I knew about her is that she was the most creative person I ever met. She was absolutely driven to create. and she was a person who never had anything. She was one of 12 children. They were poor. I don't think that she ever owned much. She was the cook at the high school. Um, and she was upcycling before there was a word for it. So anytime in the nursing home, if somebody, got flowers, she would take the flowers after they were wilted and dry the petals and use them to make pictures. And she had a sort of a distinctive quilt square that she called the anime crazy. That's, these kind of strange lines. And so I have that quilt, and it was such an inspiration to see this woman, because she didn't have a lot of money. Um, Her son and husband had both already died ahead of her. Um, she broke, kind of actually shattered her leg and was in a lot of pain. And I actually originally met her because I wanted to get some stories about the history of Stella. It was useless because she was living absolutely in the moment. Every time you went to see her, she would say, "Let me show you what I'm working on now." Um, and to me, that was such an inspiration and such a key to how to go about living a full, rich life. Um, and you can use an object to tell about an event, because, objects and events tend to be linked in our minds. And I have one that is a little bit unexpected, I think. Um, when so I have this menorah, and when I'm traveling during Hanukkah, I take this menorah with me because it's made of aluminum and it's really flat and it's easy to pack. And so I was in Sacramento visiting my uncle, and I was in the kitchen lighting this menorah when the word came down about the shootings at Sandy Hook Elementary. So this to me is linked in my mind with, I think maybe one of the last visits to my uncle and with that event. And so every time, um, for me now, that every time they say, it's the anniversary of Sandy Hook, my question is does it fall during Hanukkah this year? Because I remember the first one fell during Hanukkah. So, we make those associations between, the snowstorm and the whatever, or, where were you when such and such a thing happened? And so this object sort of does that for me. Um, and then uh, another writing exercise is to write about an object whose meaning has changed for you. So, we assume that you write about something that's, eternal, like the egg basket and the glasses, but I found myself writing about this little sign. Is this going to be backwards in the, yeah. It says, "In hoc domus sua vivas in pace et gaudio," which means, "In this your house may you dwell in peace and joy." And my dear friend Jane had this made for me when I bought this place in the country that I thought was absolutely going to be my forever home. I mean, this is finally the perfect place for me, and I will settle down and I will, do all that writing I've been wanting to do. Um, and of course, I've moved 12 times since then. And the first time I moved, I thought, well, maybe I just need to throw away the sign because, I mean, I felt like I had betrayed the sign because it wasn't my forever home. And then after about 4 moves, I thought, you know what? There's a new message here, which is wherever I am, it is my home, and my goal is to dwell in peace and joy. So, but I wrote about that and posted it on this little blog I'm doing about, meanings change. And a friend of mine, a guy I've known for 50 years, I suppose, um, said that as he was reading that, he was very much aware that his wedding ring was in the drawer, within arm's reach. And I have no idea how long he's been divorced. I mean, it's been a really long time. But he said, he can't bring himself to throw away that wedding ring, even though it doesn't mean what it used to mean, but he kind of feels like, it was part of his life. And if he just says, oh, that didn't work and throws it out, he will somehow be betraying things. So, um, and there are objects that we have. I have a really beautiful ashtray, which, now you can't really be proud of owning an ashtray. And of course, there are some things that, um, from advertising that now we just have really, we really cringe at the things that have the sort of racist and sexist overtones. Sometimes things change with time and that becomes part of the message. And so that's what I have in terms of content. Does anybody have any questions, any thoughts, any objects that you want to share about and talk about?
This was really interesting, Laura, and that for me, the favorite thing for me about it was that we get to such insight into you and your life, and
My life in Nebraska, mostly, yeah.
yeah, and just it's different than most of us. Most of us don't have farmers in our
Yeah.
family tree, and or maybe anyone who lived on the plains in Nebraska, or so thank you just for sharing so much of yourself in the process of sharing this.
I think I told you when we did that movie back when remember when we used to be in person together and we watched Everything Will Be Illuminated?
Yes.
And the people who were there that night were talking about their experience of, we tried to find the village my grandparents came from, and it doesn't exist anymore. And, they told us where they thought it used to be, or we found the village, but the cemetery is gone. And that was a real revelation to me because first of all, my immigration story, I know the name of the boat, it was the Mayflower. And second, the cemetery in Stella, Nebraska, there are 4 generations of my family buried there and 2 others buried in another cemetery 20 miles away. So that's how I come to have all of this stuff because they didn't move around much and they didn't really have to get rid of anything. And so here I am with it all. Yeah.
Laura, what about photographs? What about photographing the objects, making a catalog?
Yeah.
So when you do your writing, you have an actual picture.
And again, I think the combination of the photo with the stories would be really good. I've read the thing that says, just take a picture of the thing and then get rid of it. And that would not work for me. I mean, I think if I just had the picture, every time I saw the picture, I would say, but I don't have the thing anymore. But I think maybe the combination of having a photo of the thing and the story of the thing would be really good. And again, in Swedish death cleaning, one of the things that she talks about is photographing things and doing that. Yeah. And I think, I mean, the objects can, I mean, you could do recipes, I mean, if you have family recipes, one of my college professors did a story called, or a cookbook called How's Your Rhubarb? And it has a lot of stories about that's kind of North Dakota culture. Um, Uh, but you could do something like that. And in Swedish death cleaning, she talks about, um, there are things that are just too complicated for her to make now. She just has no interest in some of these elaborate things that she used to do. So, she copied down the recipe and she gave away the recipe and, maybe the utensils that she used to use, but that was kind of her way of being through with it. So yeah, I mean, I think that there are a lot of things depending on the object that you can use to capture the visual, But to me, the story then is going to enrich it, whatever it is. Yeah.
I'm bugged that I thought the meeting started at 7, so I missed most of your presentation, Laura, but I see it's being recorded. Where can I
Yeah.
find it
Yeah,
after?
we're going to post it on YouTube.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I'm so bummed I missed the most of it.
Yeah, because you had emailed that apparently you have a lot of really
Uh,
treasured
I
objects.
mean, some of it's over my shoulder there. That's my grandmother's teacup set, my great grandmother's teacup set. I don't know
Okay.
if you can see the cross stitch, but that was my grandmother's grandmother on my dad's side that made that cross stitch. So I've
Okay.
got a lot of, my mother likes very modern things, and I fell over the china and the crystal, the silver. So my mother has wanted none of that. So she's like, you take it, you take it. So I've got a lot, but I like the idea of taking some pictures and writing some stories of what I remember.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through some old pictures with my parents a couple weekends ago, and I was trying to write down who people were. My mom's like, you know who they are. I'm like, yeah, but I don't know if Mitchell does. Who knows beyond Mitchell? Who's I said, you
Right.
don't write it down now. When some of us know who these people are, it's going to be lost. They're going to have this lovely picture, this box of pictures, and they're not going to have any idea who these people are.
Right. And and it's sort of a truism. If you Google the phrase brown furniture, you'll see all of the articles that say, "Hey, boomer, nobody wants your brown furniture." And so apparent, yeah. So you're actually one of the rare few. Um, and so it really is a crisis, and a lot of my friends have talked to me about the fact that they have all of these cherished antiques, and their kids are just kind of going, yeah, I kind of like IKEA better, but thanks, and things like monogrammed silverware and things like that. But my friend Jan McMullen, again in Stella, is one of those people, nobody wants your brown furniture. The one thing her son took this table, because and the story is that that table was on the farm where Jan grew up, and she's up in her 80s now. And it was always, they hauled it out to the porch in the summer because there was no air conditioning, and it's Nebraska. And so they ate at this table out on the porch where, there was some air circulating. And then they would sit around on the porch around this table and talk. And that was the one thing that her son really wanted to take, and even, he got divorced, and the table was the one thing he took from the household. And, now he's moved to another state and he's taking the table. And I would submit that really it's the story and that idea of a kind of a time when people sat around and talked to each other after dinner instead of retreating to separate screens, that may be really what he finds so valuable and wants to hang on to. So I think that there's a possibility. I think there's several possibilities. If you tell the story, either you discover that it was really the story and you don't care about the thing that much, or if you tell the story, now suddenly the kids who weren't interested understand why it was such a big deal, and maybe they will be interested. Um, um, or you can come up with some, novel solution, like, the picture of my grandparents' farm,
A little interest.
that we don't want it, but,
Yeah.
thinking it through, the Stanleys might be interested in
A
that.
little interest.
Yeah.
You know, I apologize too. I also thought it was 7 o'clock, so I'm going to go back and watch it. And as you're talking, I'm thinking I would really like to share this with my sisters, and then have my sister, because we have so much stuff from my mother that is spread among the three of us that none of us treasure, but we all have and have stories. And if the three of us
Yeah. Oh, wow.
would
Yeah.
be able to tell stories together and write
Yeah.
them, that's a good idea.
And I know of at least one case where there's an object that is very treasured that kind of went down the wrong side of the family, and so there's a little tension that way. Um, so, telling the stories and sharing the stories might be a good way to be open about, I really always kind of wanted that. If you don't want it, or if your kids don't want it, in this case, it's like grandchildren who, on one side don't want it and on another side do. And so, I think it can be good about, a good way to kind of just open the conversation in a way that isn't quite as tense, you know, as it might otherwise be. Yeah.
It's nice to get some of those conversations and histories on video too. I remember several years ago, they videotaped my Aunt Sylvia, who was my grandmother's older sister, and they taped her talking about the family history, them
Yeah.
coming over, when they first came to the United States, and different stories in the old country. And it's cool because we have that now. That video is out there for talking about that. And, if she wouldn't have talked about that, none of us would have known any of this.
Yeah.
And some of it's some pretty neat stuff, and it's nice to have that.
I actually had sent my Uncle Jack a tape recorder, and because he had this really distinctive voice, for one thing, and he also, had a lot of stories, and it got there too late. He had cancer, and he was kind of
Oh.
too weak to do it. But my parents were both radio announcers, so I'm lucky to have lots of voice recordings of them. And yeah, the voice can, especially if your parents are radio announcers, the voice can bring people to life. So yeah, I think there would be a lot to be said for, for doing it as a video, or, a Zoom, and it's easy enough now to, just have a YouTube channel, and be able to, to preserve the things that way. Yeah.
A number of years ago, quite a few years ago now, my brother, when he had one of those video cameras that you carried on your shoulder and it was like this big, he got my father and his brother, his only brother, to talk about their childhood in Czechoslovakia,
Oh, wow.
growing up as very privileged children. And the stories they told, because I sat in on it, and heard what they said. It was just amazing, because I don't think the two of them had thought about these things in a long time.
Yeah.
And so we have this wonderful video of the two of them, reminiscing about their growing up and going to school and all the mischief that they got into, which was quite a lot. And it's just nice to have.
And you have converted it to digital, right?
I haven't done anything with it. I don't know who's got the original
Yeah.
video. We'd have to track it down, but I know there were copies made. I'd have to see.
Yeah.
I have my father, about 5 hours with him telling stories about growing up in Russia. He didn't come here till he was 7, and he remembered singing in the bars against the Tsar. He remembered pogroms. He remembered his mother brushing the sand on Fridays for Shabbat. The floor was all sand, and so they brushed the floors for Shabbat. And so those stories are really, really special.
Yeah. And one of the arguments I would make for paper
Hold it up.
is I have
Camera will pick it
we
up.
had a family reunion, and my cousin, the voiceover guy, and my half brother, the voiceover guy, both did recordings at this place called the Pavlok Broadcasting Museum. And then we got recordings of my cousin's father, the radio announcer, and my father, the radio announcer, and put them all on a CD. And I think I still have the CD, and I think I could probably still find some machine that would have a CD holder, but who knows? And so it's really important to keep updating that format, folks. I also have a recording somewhere of my grandfather reciting Thanatopsis at age 80, or probably 80, late 70s. Yeah. He could recite all of Snowbound if you didn't stop him. Yeah. So, and with a really distinctive voice. So yeah, if you can get, use the objects to prompt some storytelling. That's also a great combination. Yeah.
Do you loan yourself out to consult? I'm just thinking we did a history of my father's family and my cousins helped, but we had lots of pictures and stories. I want to do my mother's family, but I only have objects. I really don't have pictures of her family. And I'm wondering if I could tell her history through the objects.
Absolutely.
My sisters.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be happy to, I actually keep saying I'm going to do a little booklet on life and objects like I did on the pandemic thing, and I keep getting distracted. But yeah, I mean, I would say just, pick 10 objects that seem compelling and start writing and see where it goes. But that's why, I have those exercises, like, if you need a way to start kind of thinking about it,
Laura, weren't you thinking that this could lead into a little workshop? Are you still interested in doing that?
if anybody's interested in, in doing a workshop and working through some of the exercises, yeah, I'd be happy to help with that too. Yeah.
I'd like to share this, if I may. Just last week, I had an experience. Our granddaughter had a bridal luncheon that was very beautiful. And when I got the invitation, remember, something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. Well, this is a picture of Bud's mother.
Hold it up higher. There.
Of Bud's mother and Nina, our granddaughter, who is to be married next May.
Oh, wow.
And I got to thinking, and my mother, Blanche, and Bud's mother, Charlotte, we thought were very dear and special. And I thought Nina might enjoy something that we might pass on that can kind of go through the family. So this is a crossword puzzle too that we had of our trip to Poland when all our grandchildren and family went. But I wrote a little thing explaining all these things, and we passed on. First of all, it was a bracelet of Charlotte's that we wanted to pass on, something old, and it's over 100 years old. And the bracelet we placed in a beaded purse that was my mother's, a white beaded purse that we thought would be lovely for the family to pass on after Nina. I have 8 grandchildren. We have 8 grandchildren. And they would, if they want, they could each wear that. And the bracelet was inside the beaded purse. And I kind of told the story about our families, about something old. And this was another one that I presented. This was Nina when she was a baby. Hold it up. And show Nina now. I'm turning the other page. Well, this is our Nina, and she's to be married. And I wrote a letter to her, just explaining my love for her. I just had and I presented it at the luncheon, and I had such a lovely time doing that. And people were so interested in everything.
Yeah.
So your words opened my thoughts, and I needed to share them with you.
Oh, thank you.
That's
Long after the food processor is gone, that's going to be absolutely and the idea of making that, what would be really cool would be if you could start a tradition that every bride writes a little note and tucks it in that purse along with the
Well, the purse isn't very large. It's just a small purse that I carried it at my wedding.
Okay. Yeah.
Laura, you can do this today. You don't have to rely upon what somebody is passing down. This Nina in the picture, and this picture, she had it made into a crossword puzzle.
Yeah.
Where was that picture taken? It's taken at the Lomza, Poland cemetery, where all my great grandparents are married. But while we were there, I took
Oh.
from the cemetery,
Yeah.
where all my great-grandparents are buried. And then I also picked the rock up from the road leading to the village where my father was born.
Oh.
It was sentimental.
Yeah,
You know, we just
and,
like
and Dina knows the story that in Lubikirki, Poland, was also the home of my grandfather, Louis Lepkowski, who started the B'nai Zedek Synagogue.
Now you should add a stone from B'nai Zedek yard and from the cemetery or from your parents' house. You know, you should add some
Yeah.
stones.
And label
Um,
them.
This just made me think of something. In 2001, my father took 21 of us to the Czech Republic to show us where he was born and what things were like. And I have this. It's a piece of roof tile. You know, the ones that are kind of this color and they hook into each other and in Eastern Europe, most of the the roofs on better houses are made of this kind of stuff. And my grandfather had a factory that manufactured this. He was one of 2 factories in the whole country that did that. And but in 1989, my father took me back there with him to his high school reunion, his 50th high school reunion, and we were able to get onto the property that had been his father's factory. And I picked this up on the ground and I have it. And the watchman who was looking over the property, because the Russians had taken everything away and it was closed up and nobody was there, but there was an office, and I also got a brochure that told about all the products that they manufactured. But this is like all that's left of what was there.
And that's the kind of thing, again, like the boot, you know, write the story, because otherwise somebody's going to go,
What's
I
this?
wonder what this broke off of, you know, and why on earth she kept it, and, you know, won't really understand the significance of it. Yeah.
Well, we're coming to a close of our time, and I just wanted to, you know, make sure people who want to continue this with Laura's guidance, please make yourself known to her. We did set aside some times on the Zoom schedule, but you know, that may not fit for the people who are interested, Laura. So, you know, let me know if you choose a time, and if you want to, then invite others from the congregation who didn't have the advantage of being here to join, and we'll try to schedule that. I assume this would be by Zoom. Is that what you would want to do?
Sure. Yeah. Zoom works.
Well, I would like to do it in, okay to ask my sisters to join us?
Absolutely.
Make it easier if it was on Zoom, right?
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking, yeah.
Yeah.
Madison and Milwaukee, yeah.
And in the meantime,
I would like to also.
if anybody wants just, you know, some of the, I can send you links to the things that I have, if, you know, if you want to see the exercises. And maybe this will be the impetus I need to finally finish this. I'm gesturing at the place where it's been gathering dust for 2 weeks since I've gotten to it. But because I really would like to finish this little booklet thing. So
It's
yeah.
wonderful. It's really you know, something that we can all take and just run with our own ideas, and you know, do it in our own way. But I think you've opened up a lot of doors and ways of thinking about objects that we have that we probably would have not have considered before. So
Can I-
Or did you make that your list of, you know, things that you showed at the beginning of the session, or was that from the congregation originally that you learned?
PowerPoint?
Yeah.
The list of objects, you mean?
Yeah, and what to do yeah, the whole PowerPoint was that all from you, or
Yeah.
were those things from the original
No,
session that
yeah.
you went to at the temple?
No, this is all me. Yeah.
Amazing,
The
amazing.
the
It's
storytelling,
wonderful.
the workshop was storytelling, and so I just kind of took it and ran with it. And as I say, I do have another, 50,000 words that I just need to get around to sort of proofreading. So, Jim, did you get your questions answered? I know you had, I think you're at a kind of a different stage with it, but I just wanted to be sure that.
Yeah, no, I did. Thank you. I really got a great deal out of it, because I think the stories are important to go with. Mine is built around images. I have probably 80,000 images I'm going through from stuff we've done. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So
Yeah.
anybody who has ideas or wants help, just ping me, and I can either give you some individual stuff to get you started, or if you want some ongoing support, we can schedule some sessions and talk about it.
I'm thinking, Dina, about Camille, who would probably love this, but doesn't get onto Zoom. And I'm trying to think of a way to, invite her to one of our homes to do this with us, or
I could do that.
Yeah, she's
She,
in
li-
your
she
building.
lives in my apartment building.
great,
Mhm.
because she has trouble with the technology.
Yeah.
Right. But I could set, if I don't want to do it, I could just set her up at my dining room table and
Yeah,
That'd be awesome.
because
I'd be
she
happy
really
to.
get into the family storytelling.
Right. She has a lot to contribute.
Right,
She's done a
right,
lot of writing. I don't know if she's thought about objects, though.
Mhm.
right. But maybe one of you could approach her and, ask her if she's interested. But, she's certainly welcome here.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm actually in contact with her quite often. We haven't talked about this, but we've talked about other stuff. So yeah, I will.
Well, Laura, then tell her, she's more than welcome here.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Laura. This was outstanding.
Thank
And
you.
we will put it on YouTube. And if you talk to others and they say, oh, I wish I had gone, tell them they can still go to the YouTube or be in touch with Laura about these workshops.
And once it's on YouTube, I can maybe in the comments put some of the links so that you can see, what it's like as a blog and what it's like as a YouTube video and things like that.
Cool. Very
Yeah, by
good.
all means, be in touch. I love other people's stories. So this was wonderful hearing the stories that you guys have. It's great.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
It's great.
Good night.
Thanks, Laura. Gotta watch that video.
Thanks,
Okay.
Laura. Me too.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.